Not the soft kind, not the peaceful kind. This was the kind of silence that swallowed sound whole, the kind that warned you that if you disappeared up here, nobody would hear you call. Sometimes a woman reaches a point where staying where she is feels harder than starting over. In the 1880s, becoming a mail-order bride was not a strange idea. It was often the only idea left for women who had run out of choices and men who had run out of hope. Martha had run out of both. The wagon driver refused to take her any farther than the base of the trail. She had climbed the rest of the way alone, carpetbag cutting into her shoulder, dust sticking to her boots and throat. By the time the cabin appeared through the pine trees, her legs trembled. It looked smaller than she imagined, darker, alone against the mountain like something forgotten. A man stood on the porch. He did not wave. He did not smile. He did not move. She stopped at the bottom step. He stepped down just one step and held out a burlap sack. "1 week's provisions," he said. His voice was flat, like stone pulled from a cold creek. "If you're smart, you'll use it to leave." That was her welcome. She looked at his face, lined and hard, then at his hands. His nails were clean. She took the sack. He turned and walked back into the cabin, left the door open behind him. Martha picked up her carpetbag and followed. The cabin was one room, a table, 2 chairs, one broken, a rope bed against the far wall, a pot-belly stove in the corner, full of cold ash. No curtains, no quilt, nothing soft. Everything worked. Nothing lived. She did not ask questions. She cleaned the stove, built a fire, cooked salt pork and cornmeal mush from the sack he gave her, set 2 plates on the table. He came inside, took his plate, and stood by the window to eat. Did not sit across from her, did not speak. When she tried to ask how long he had lived here, he walked out before she finished. That night, she lay on the rope bed and listened to coyotes cry in the distance. Through the window, she saw a lantern burning in the barn. A tall shadow stood in the doorway for a long time, not moving. She did not know what kind of man watched the dark like that, but she did not leave. The next morning, she found a garden behind the cabin, or what used to be one. Weeds had taken it over. Thistle and wild grass choked the space. But beneath it, she saw old herbs. Sage. Thyme. Lavender turned dry and brittle. Someone once cared about this soil. She knelt and began pulling weeds. The thorns bit into her palms. Blood welled up. The ground was hard and stubborn. Each root fought back. She kept pulling. Silas stood 10 feet away watching her. He said nothing. Turned and began splitting wood instead. The sound of his axe fell steady and sharp through the mountain air. Her hands moved in the dirt. His axe struck wood. No words passed between them. Just work. After an hour, he brought her a bucket of cold water, set it beside her without looking at her face, then walked away. She drank from it and went back to the weeds. By evening, she uncovered something in the soil. Not a root, not a rock. A small cloth doll, one button eye missing. The fabric faded, stuffed with corn husks. She cleaned it at the well, set it on the windowsill to dry. When Silas came in and saw it, something changed behind his eyes. He did not speak, just walked out toward the tree line and did not return until dark. That night, he said only one thing. "Garden's been dead 3 years, won't come back." Martha looked at the doll, at the soil on her hands. "We'll see," she said softly after he had gone. The days settled into rhythm. She woke before dawn, built the fire, made coffee, cleaned the cabin until light came through the window clear. She sewed curtains from flour sacks, brought sourdough starter back to life, and baked bread that filled the cabin with warm smell. When she hung the curtains, he stood still for a long time looking at them. That evening, the broken chair was fixed. He did not mention it. On the 8th day, she counted the empty provision sack. 1 week exactly. Just as he had said. The smart thing would have been to leave. She did not. Instead, she walked 5 miles down the mountain to the settlement, spent nearly all the money she had left on flour, lard, sugar, and seed packets meant for mountain soil. The storekeeper shook his head. "Women always think they'll be different." "I am," she said. She carried the heavy sack all the way back herself. That evening she planted basil and rosemary and mint in neat rows, pressed each seed into dark soil with her thumb. Each seed was a choice. Each row was a decision. She would not leave because a man told her to. She would leave only if she chose to. That night, she set 2 plates on the table again, and for the first time, he sat across from her instead of standing by the window. He ate every bite. He did not speak, but he did not walk away either. And somewhere outside, in the soil she had turned with bleeding hands, the first small green shoot began pushing through the earth. On the morning the riders came, the air felt wrong. Too still. Too heavy. Martha had been awake since before sunrise. Coffee boiled on the stove. The cabin smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke. Outside, the garden showed tiny green shoots breaking through the soil she had fought so hard to clear. Silas had not spoken much since the day she returned from the settlement with the heavy sack on her back, but something between them had shifted. He sat at the table now when he ate. He repaired things without being asked. He no longer watched her like she was a stranger passing through. Still, the silence remained. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. More than one horse. Fast. She stepped to the window and saw 3 men cresting the rise. They were not neighbors, not traders. These were the kind of men who looked at a place and measured what they could take. They rode straight into the yard. Silas was in the barn. The door stood open, but he was not yet visible. One of the men dismounted and grinned up at Martha through the window. He was missing a tooth on the left side. Another walked toward the porch steps like he already owned them. Martha's hand tightened around the edge of the table. There was no lock on the door, no bar, just wood and will. She opened the door and stepped outside before they could knock. "You McCrae's new wife?" the first man asked. She did not answer. "My husband's checking fence in the north pasture," she said instead. "Won't be back till evening." The second man laughed. "That's convenient." The first man climbed 1 step onto the porch. Martha's heart beat hard against her ribs, but her voice stayed steady. "There's coffee," she said, "if you want it." The word surprised even her. Behind the men, movement. Silas stepped out of the barn with a rifle in his hands. He did not raise it. He did not shout. He simply walked forward, the rifle resting across his arms where everyone could see it. The men turned. Silence filled the yard. Martha stepped down from the porch and moved between the strangers and Silas. She did not look back at him. "There's coffee," she repeated. "And biscuits." The first man blinked. "You serious?" "Yes." She walked back into the cabin. Her legs trembled, but she kept them straight. She poured coffee into tin cups, set the last of the biscuits on a tray, took a breath until her hands stopped shaking. Then she carried everything outside. Silas stood still, jaw tight, rifle ready. The men stood unsure. Martha set the tray on the chopping block and poured coffee without spilling a drop. The first man slowly sat down and picked up a cup. He sniffed it. Drank. The second one grabbed a biscuit. The third stayed by the horses, watching. They drank in silence. The wind pushed dust across the yard. A crow called from the cottonwood. "Heard some strays come through here last week," the first man said finally. "Wondered if McCrae seen 'em." "Haven't," Silas answered, his voice rough from not being used. The man nodded, drained his cup, set it down, careful. "'Bliged," he said. They mounted their horses and rode away without another word. Martha did not sit down until the sound of hooves faded completely. Silas lowered the rifle. His hands shook. "They could have hurt you," he said. "They were leaving," she answered. "You don't know that." "I do now." He stared at her like he was trying to understand something he had never seen before. "You protected me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Protected both of us." That evening, for the first time, he did not wait until midnight to come inside. He came in while the sun was still up. They sat at the table and ate in silence that felt different. Not empty, not cold, just careful. When the plates were cleared, he did not stand immediately. "Emma was my wife," he said. Martha did not interrupt. "Fever took her, and the baby, 3 years ago next month." The lamp flickered. He did not wipe the tears from his beard. "I wasn't there," he continued. "Fence was down. I thought I had time. She died calling my name." Martha let him speak. "The garden was hers," he said. "She planted it. Said she wanted fresh herbs for when she was nursing. After she died, I couldn't look at it, so I let it die too." The room felt smaller with the truth inside it. "The other women," he said, voice low. "I brought them up here, thinking if I called them help instead of wives, it wouldn't hurt. But every time they tried to clean or cook or fix something, all I could see was her. So I made it easy for them to leave." He looked at her then, really looked. "But you didn't leave." "I chose not to," she said. He nodded slowly. "When I got sick," he said, "you sat there for 3 days. I woke once and saw your hand resting on the blanket, not holding me, just there." She remembered. The fever, the way he gripped her wrist and whispered, "Don't leave." "I wasn't trying to save you," she said. "I just wasn't going to let you be alone." His breath shook. "I don't want a replacement," he said. "I don't want a ghost. I want something new. If you'll stay, not as help, as my wife." The question hung between them. She had been waiting for it since the moment he handed her that sack and told her to leave. "Yes," she said. He closed his eyes for a second, like the word hurt and healed at the same time. "I'm not her," she said gently. "I know. And I'm not leaving. I know." They sat there with the lamp burning low and the mountain wind pushing against the walls. Outside, the garden held its rows of small green shoots, growing despite everything that had come before. Inside, 2 people sat at a rough wooden table and decided to try again. The morning after he asked her to stay, the mountain looked different. Not softer, not easier, just shared. Martha woke before sunrise out of habit. The cabin was still dark. She could hear Silas breathing from his bedroll in the corner. Steady, alive, present. For a long moment she lay there listening. This was not a rescue, not a grand love story written in lightning. It was something quieter. 2 people choosing to wake up in the same room again. She slipped from bed and built the fire. The stove caught quickly. Coffee began to boil. Silas sat up slowly. For the first time, he did not avoid her eyes when she turned toward him. "Morning," he said. It was a small word. It felt enormous. "Morning," she answered. They drank coffee at the table together, not facing away, not standing at the window, across from each other. The silence between them did not feel sharp anymore. It felt like space that could be filled when needed. After breakfast, he picked up his hammer and walked toward the garden. Martha followed. The fence he had built weeks ago was strong, but he began reinforcing the corners, digging the posts deeper, measuring twice before driving nails. "If we're going to do this," he said, without looking at her, "it should be done right." She understood what he meant. She knelt beside him and held the nails while he hammered. The sound rang steady through the valley, hammer on metal, wood settling into place, side by side. By noon, the garden stood protected. The small green shoots inside the fence trembled in the breeze, but did not break. Silas stepped back and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "It's good," Martha said. He nodded. "It's ours." That evening, she took the wooden hairbrush from the mantel, the one that had belonged to Emma. She sat on the porch step and pulled it gently through her hair. Slow strokes. The bristles were worn smooth from years of use, the wood warm from her hands. Silas sat below her carving something from pine. "What are you making?" she asked. "A spoon," he said. "Kitchen spoon. The others are worn." She watched the shape form under his knife. Simple, useful, made with care. "You stayed," he said after a while. "Yes." "Why?" She thought about the long walk to the settlement, the heavy sack cutting into her shoulders, the seeds pressed into hard soil, the nights alone at the table, the fever, the riders. "Because you gave me a choice," she said. "You would have let me leave." He nodded slowly. "Didn't want you trapped." "I'm not trapped." "No," he said quietly. "You're not." The wind moved through the garden and carried the smell of earth and fresh growth. That night, he did not sleep in the barn. He unrolled his bed near the stove instead. Still separate, still respectful, but closer. Days turned into weeks. The basil grew first, then rosemary. Mint spread strong and stubborn. The garden that had been declared dead began to breathe again. Martha dried herbs on the windowsill, hung them carefully with twine. The cabin began to smell alive. Silas repaired the barn roof before the next storm came, fixed the gate hinge, mended the north fence he once blamed for everything. They worked together without forcing words. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they did not. One evening, as rain tapped steady against the roof, Silas brought down the small wooden box from the high shelf. Inside lay the wrapped cloth doll. He set it gently on the table. "We should bury her proper," he said. Martha nodded. The next morning they walked to the cottonwood near the creek, the one that stood tall and steady against every storm. Silas dug the hole himself. He placed the doll inside, still wrapped in clean muslin. They stood in silence as the earth covered it. Not forgetting, not replacing, just honoring. When they walked back to the cabin, something invisible had settled. Not gone, just at rest. That night, they sat close enough that their shoulders brushed. Neither pulled away. "I don't want to live in the past," Silas said quietly. "And I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." "We won't," Martha answered. "We'll live here." He reached for her hand then, slowly, carefully. She let him take it. His grip was not desperate like it had been during fever. It was steady, certain. The mountain outside remained wild. The wind still howled some nights. Supplies still ran thin before the next wagon came. Life did not become easy. But it became shared. Spring turned into summer. One afternoon, Martha stood in the garden and realized the rows were full, green and strong, leaves brushing her skirts. Silas stood at the fence watching her. "You were right," he said. "About what?" "It came back." She smiled. "We came back." He walked into the garden and stood beside her, the sun warm on their shoulders, dirt under their nails, work ahead of them still. He bent and pulled a sprig of basil, rubbed it between his fingers. The scent filled the air. "Smells like something new," he said. "It is." That night, the cabin door closed against the wind. Inside, 2 plates sat on the table. 2 cups. 2 chairs. No one stood at the window anymore. No lantern burned lonely in the barn. And high in the mountains, where second chances were once thinner than air,